manages your energy reserves such that you can keep up a high quality and you can keep up a training load commensurate with elite rowing performance. In other words, you can do 160 kilometers per week. But you can't do 160 kilometers of rowing per week if you're constantly doing high intensity efforts, because you basically rifle through your carbohydrate resources.
And it's not just as simple as like eating some sugar afterwards.
That's right.
It takes days to does it take days for it to get reabsorbed, or is it partially like...
You're spot on, effectively. If I burn through all my carbohydrate reserves in my training session today, if I really optimize my diet and I rest for the next 24 hours, I can probably restore 100% of what I lost.
Okay.
But if I have a suboptimal diet, and most people probably do in respect to carbohydrates, then the next day their fuel reserves are starting at a lower level. So over the week, one of the common things we'd ask people when they're doing elite training programs is, so when do you have your rest day? Sunday. Okay, so as you go through the week, how much more tired do you get? And of course what people usually say is by the time they get to the rest day, they're just hanging on. And what's probably happening is their carbohydrate reserves are progressively deteriorating through the week.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why high volume training, as long as it's low intensity, is a good thing. Because if you keep the intensity low, if you keep the lactate levels below 1.5, you're not rifling through the carbohydrate reserves. If you're relying largely on fat reserves in the body to sustain your training, because you're doing long, low intensity training, you might barely be touching your carbohydrate reserves. It's the moment you start to go into that middle zone of the sort of 2 to 4 millimole, because in that zone you can really run through your carbohydrate reserves in 30, 40, 50 minutes, but you can actually do quite a lot of training until you end up running out of energy or the acidity becomes too much. You can't really do lots of high intensity training because the acidity effect shuts your training load down. It's the reason people like Steve will talk about avoiding that middle zone is it's a place where you could very easily run through your carbohydrate reserves feeling like you're doing a lot of training, but actually when you look at the longer view, you're just not doing the volume of training that you could be doing to maximize all the adaptation.
Yeah.
So what's the benefit, second point, to all this lactate testing? I think the answer is it gives you a point, a metabolic fixed point that says if you want to sustain a high training load, stay below this level, because you'll be able to continue for a long period of time and you'll be able to do it day after day after day. And then once in a while, maybe in one session in 5, you throw in the high intensity effort to top everything off. But I think avoiding a lot of that training that's moderately hard is probably no bad thing. You solve it by doing more base training and getting the volumes up into that optimal. That's why I talk about like 100k as a sort of really good, because most people
were loving that when they said, everybody was like, oh, can I start doing 100k now? I'm like, okay, we can try, give it a go.
I think it's manageable. In 6 hours it can be.
And it was good the advice that you said as well about being time efficient as well. I think that's something that is like really important to think about and to not think about. I'm going to bring on a time management specialist for them as well to try and have like because it's something I hadn't really considered before, but of course. I think as well, like what I always kind of say is like it's a mindset thing where people, it's not so much that they're afraid to go too slow, it's like can be that they're afraid to go too fast. So in order to make up for not going too slow, they just go kind of hard all the time, and it feels like
good.
If you kind of equalize that by not having to really push it, by missing that mid zone, that low end zone, then it's just kind of be like an ego thing. And psychologically it can just be a bit more, in my experience I think that's the way
that is the other great benefit of the testing and the heart rate monitors. If people think there's good science behind it, and there is, it will give them the confidence. If they trust you, it'll give them the confidence to realize that okay, paddling around at a 1.5 millimole split equivalent doesn't feel hard in the first 30 minutes, but in the next 30 minutes, and then when you get to 90 minutes, they start to realize they've had a good workout. People have to reinvent their views often about good training sensation, and to understand that the training session sensation, it's the full session. It's not just what happens in the first 20 minutes, but a lot of people feel that they need to get a training effect in the first minutes of the session. That's why they overestimate the pace. They self-select a pace that feels like they're working the body, What they don't realise was if they had just backed off a little bit and gone longer, they would still get the training effect sensation. It just takes longer in the session to get there, but the big benefit is at the end of the week, they're hitting the 100 kilometres rather than hitting the 60. It's manageable, it's humane, but it's also, I think that's what I think the biggest selling point is. It's just the way most elite endurance athletes train. They understand that they need to get through a certain volume of work each week, and if they just keep going hard, they're not going to make it.